Hello, everybody. Welcome to an interview from the Australian Property Investor magazine. I'm here today with the Commerz Real team from Germany. Hello, guys. Welcome to join us.
Hi, Wouter.
I believe you've just actually been to visit us here in Australia. How was your visit?
Yeah, we just returned from a really nice week, coming back last Saturday morning. So we arrived just a week before on a Sunday in Sydney. Spent 3 days in Sydney, 1 day in Melbourne, then going back to Singapore with another 2 days in Singapore. So it was a quite exhausting but really nice trip with a lot of experiences.
Okay, good. Was it your first time in Australia?
No, actually not. It was my third time in Australia. But still, let's say just a few times in Australia. So it's always good to be there and to understand the culture, the mentality, the market, etc.
All right, no, perfect. Well, that brings us to the main purpose of this interview, because Commerz Real is interested in investing in commercial real estate here in Australia. So what is it that makes the Australian market so interesting for a company that is based in Germany?
Yeah, actually, we are already invested in the Australian market. So we entered the Australian market already, I think, 6-7 years ago, when we bought into 110 Goulburn Street in Sydney. A pretty nice building in the, I would say, fringe CBD of the Sydney market, with a really good and stable tenant AFP in it. And then we expanded to Brisbane with a hotel investment, which we completely redeveloped over the last 24 months during COVID for our institutional hotel fund. And unfortunately, over the last couple of years, it was pretty difficult to further expand because prices went up, yields compressed furthermore. And in addition to that, we had to struggle with the hedging costs in order to hedge our currency, which is quite challenging usually. And so at the end, we were not in a position to further expand. But we believe it was a good timing last week to look at the Australian market again and to look how the cycle will go further in the next couple of months, because I mean, interest rates went up in your country as well. Prices have maybe slightly started to correct, and so that's a quite interesting time for us.
Okay, all right. Thank you for sharing that, and I'm sure that COVID did not help with pointing Australia as a possible country for further investments. But it's interesting enough, because it's the same for local investors. They had similar challenges, and they started to pick it up to do quite a bit of investments now as well, as the market is changing. Now, you've mentioned that you have investments in New South Wales and in Queensland. Are those the particular markets that you are interested in, or would you consider also other states here down under?
The major focus is definitely Sydney and Melbourne in terms of office exposure, because we just like the most liquid markets, in which we believe are Melbourne and Sydney. So Brisbane was, from a hotel perspective, a quite interesting market, but we wouldn't probably buy an office building in Brisbane because we simply believe the market is not big enough for us. We just would like to concentrate on the major markets in order to also run an efficient property and asset management strategy.
Okay, all right. So it's larger markets that you are interested in, not necessarily the more affordable markets, because there can be it's such a large country, Australia, that you have the Sydney market is completely different than the South Australian, the Tasmanian, or the West Australian market. And West Australia on itself is almost half as big as Europe. So Okay, all right. Are you mainly interested in office space, or would you also consider industrial or retail or something like that?
Yeah, we are pretty much focused on offices in super prime locations. So if you look at our portfolio, our main portfolio, roughly 50% of the portfolio consists of office space, always located in the prime locations of the major gateway cities across the globe. And that's exactly our focus in Australia as well. We are in a position to buy hotels, as I mentioned in Brisbane, for example. We also look at multifamily in other countries, but in respect of Australia, we would just like to focus first on the office market.
All right, no, understood. All right. So with that, what challenges does Australia give you? You mentioned before that the affordability was a big challenge. And of course, the office markets, they have suffered a little bit from a lease investment point of view with work from home, which sort of start to stabilize and people are coming back to the offices. But when you concentrate on the Australian market, what is it that is the biggest challenge compared to other markets that you're investing in?
I couldn't say that Australia is facing a bigger challenge than other markets. I think it is much more for us the currency. The currency is really a challenge for us because if you look at the euro and other foreign currencies like the US dollar or the Aussie dollar, then obviously hedging costs are quite high. So you need to buy into quite higher cap rates in yielding properties in order to deliver a proper return to your investors. So this makes it quite difficult. But on the other side, we see that prices, and you mentioned it as well, that prices have started to slightly correct already. You see that on the letting market, incentives went up significantly. So we are talking about 35–40% of tenant incentives in order to lease up the space. Face rents are quite okay, I think, still okay, but the net effective rents went down a little bit. So this is now maybe the right timing where we see more corrections in the future, with also upcoming interest rates as well. So equity is key, I think, in the next couple of months. We have a lot of equity, and we want to take advantage of this equity play, which we definitely see in a couple of markets in the world. Okay,
all right, understood. That's quite interesting how complex your strategy actually is, and with the amount of things that you need to take into consideration. You mentioned before that you don't see different challenges if you compare Australian market with other markets. But is there a difference if you compare the Australian markets to the European markets?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, but I wouldn't talk about challenges. I would like to talk about opportunities and chances. In Australia is a pretty nice example for growth. A growth story which is, I think, exceptional in the world. I mean, you have quite significant population growth. You have a lot of commodities and resources in your country. So this makes it pretty attractive from a global perspective. And if you also look at the challenges we are facing in Europe right now with the war in the Ukraine, with Russia, with the high inflation, etc. So at the end, we want to understand, is there a growth story or is it not a growth story? And in Europe, you see, I mean, in Germany, you definitely see, let's say, you don't see population growth. You don't have these kind of resources you have in Australia. And this makes it quite interesting to diversify your portfolio across the globe. I mean, as you know, we have already a $3 billion US dollar exposure in the United States, which we built up, and we recently opened our offices, our local offices in New York. So we have our foot on the ground, we have a good exposure, and this is maybe also an example of what we could see in APEC as well, maybe Australia. And we like the transparency and the political stability in Australia. I mean, it's definitely something which you start liking a bit more and looking at this more in these times. If you look at the challenges we're facing in Europe right now, and look at the UK, also not a good stability in terms of the political situation. So I think Australia has a lot of good arguments to play right now, and that's exactly what attracts us as well.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah. Yeah, I was focusing on the challenges because, you know, having the, imagining, I own property as well, you know, me personally, overseas, and I find that more challenging than it is, you know, compared to the properties that I own here in Australia, being on the ground, being local. So that's probably why I was focusing on what the challenges are. But I like how the way you think of, you know, investing in property, it's challenging, full stop. And what we need to concentrate on are the opportunities and the potential opportunity that might present itself. And yeah, I like the way that you think of Australia in that way, because we have many, I mean, the Australian economy is basically based on a few sectors, and one of the biggest ones is property. That's a fact, and it has grown so exponentially over the past, and the cycles are always the same, and history repeats itself. So I like the way that that you view that. So thanks for sharing those thoughts with us. Last question: what is the role of ESG criteria to play for European investors?
First of all, I mean, I was maybe I don't know whether I should say that, but I was really positively surprised the way the Australians looking at ESG. I think you're pretty much advanced, more advanced than I expected, to be honest. But I think you have a pretty clear view on ESG. We had really good meetings with a couple of experts in the Australian market, where also on the new development side, you have all the aspects already in consideration. You take everything in account. And that's really interesting, and is a perfect link to Commerz Real right now, that you guys have really started to link real estate with renewable energy already. So it's pretty normal that you put solar panels on the roof of your properties. You're trying to really produce your electricity with renewable energies. And that's something which we also drive forward very much in our company. We are one of the few experts and asset managers in the market, in the world, who really drive forward the combination of real estate, renewable energy, and not just putting solar panels on the roof, but also doing really onshore and offshore wind farms. And therefore, Australia is also, in respect of this topic, a really interesting market, where we would also like to expand furthermore. So it's on the one side real estate, but also on the other side the renewable energy side, and both is pretty attractive in your country, and therefore the ESG topic is pretty nice to see that is something which is pretty aligned with our DNA and our thinking as well. So it was pretty positive.
Okay, all right. Well, excellent. So where will be the next investment be? You have something on the radar?
Unfortunately, we don't have anything on the radar. We have looked at a couple of opportunities and buildings, but as I mentioned in the beginning of the interview, it's maybe still a little bit too early to really step in. We still would like to further understand where interest rates going and how the letting market performs in the next couple of months. So it's something which we are monitoring carefully and where we would like to be ready and to get prepared. And that was also the reason for the trip. So we have got a really good understanding now, I think, about the current trends in the Australian market, and this, yeah, makes us quite positive right now.
Okay, all right, excellent. Well, thank you for your time. I enjoyed having this chat with you. As I mentioned before, I'll complete an article about this, and we'll post the actual video interview online as well. And if anybody has a question or an idea or an update that would like to share with you, I'm always happy to share contacts in between with my network. So I'm happy to facilitate that as well. For now, Dankeschön.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, guys.